Hi everyone, welcome to Birthing at Home, a podcast. I'm Elsie, your host. I'm a home birth mum of 2 little boys, I'm a mental health nurse, the co-creator of Homebirth Victoria, and I'm a Melbourne-based doula. If you want to learn more about me, the podcast, or my work, check out www.birthingathome.com.au. And before we begin today, I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians of the land I'm recording on in Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. I would also like to acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have been birthing at home on country for tens of thousands of years prior to the British invasion and acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded. In this month's Midwife Story episode, I chat with Jo Hunter, who many of you may know from being one of the creators of Birth Time. And if you haven't seen it, it's essentially mandatory for anyone planning to give birth. She's also a home birth midwife, former doula, and former convener for Homebirth Australia, just to name a couple of things that she's done. I invited Jo to come on and chat with me to give some context around home birth in Australia in the past 30 or so years. Also, given that 3 of her 4 children were born at home in the late 90s and early 2000s, and to also talk about the current issues affecting home birth in Australia right now. The issue around public indemnity insurance for private midwives, including home birth attending midwives, is evolving as the weeks go by, so make sure to follow Homebirth Australia and join their newsletter for the most up-to-date information. I hope you love this episode as much as I do. Welcome, Jo, to Birthing at Home, a podcast.
Oh, thank you. It's awesome being here.
Thank you for joining me. So to listeners, Jo is going to be the midwife story of what month we're in, July. And she has so amazingly agreed to give us a bit of history about home birth in Australia. But before we get started, Jo, are you able to give a bit of background about who you are, where you live currently, where you're from? I know that did you come from the UK?
Originally.
Very originally. Yeah, I saw that on your website. And yeah, just a bit of a background to who you are.
Yeah, sure. I'm Jo and I live in Sydney. I'm a home birth midwife and I've been a home birth midwife for 16 years now. I was born in England and we were 10-pound poms, so we came over on the boat when I was 3. So I don't remember it.
Wow.
But, so my family originally from England, grew up in the western suburbs of Sydney. And then I went back when I was 17 and lived there I was just about 18 and lived there for 3 years, travelled and then lived there for 3 years. And I worked over there as a mothercraft nurse. So I used to basically move into families' homes for the first 6 weeks after they had their baby and help them with their newborns.
Whoa.
Yeah. It was cool. I loved it. I really loved it. And it was a great way of, immersing myself in the London culture and getting free accommodation and being paid for it. So that was so good. That was very good. And then came back to Australia and I worked in early childhood for a while. And then I had my first baby in 1996 and she was the first. Am I just giving you a bio or am I just going to go?
Yeah, just go. Okay. Go for it. Great. Go for it.
All right, awesome.
I was just thinking 1996, that's the same year that I was born.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So I hadn't heard of home birth before. I didn't know it was a thing. And my sister-in-law actually had a home birth with my nephew in 1992.
Wow.
And she raved about how amazing it was. And, so that was the first time I'd ever heard of it. And so she kind of broke the seal in our family of having home birth. So I didn't have to deal with that
taboo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
I didn't really. Everyone was pretty supportive of it. I think probably coming from the UK, it's particularly back then, it wasn't an uncommon thing. And I know my dad was born at home in the UK.
Wow.
Yeah, so it wasn't seen as a taboo thing within my family, but certainly within the wider community, it was seen as a bit of a bizarre thing to do. So I got pregnant with my first baby in 96 and I birthed her in a birth centre in Sydney. I chose that really because we had no money. So
Yeah.
I couldn't really afford a home birth. I would have loved to have had one, but and
So it was still quite expensive back then as well.
yeah. I mean, I
Wow.
think it was about, I can't remember exactly, but I know it was around about $2,000.
Yeah.
Which, 28 years ago,
then
was a substantial amount of money.
Yeah. We're in a different time right now.
Absolutely. I birthed her in the birth centre, and I had I arrived at like 7 centimetres dilated. I had a lovely water birth, and then things went pear-shaped. So I wanted to have a physiological third stage, and the midwife, I guess, thought that meant just don't give Synto. So she pulled on the cord and pulled the cord off and left the placenta inside me, and I ended up hemorrhaging, losing 1,500 mil, and ended up in theatre, taking the placenta out, and then a blood transfusion, and it was a very unnecessary situation.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
So then I fell pregnant with my next baby, and that was in 1998, and I was then considered high risk because I'd had a postpartum hemorrhage, and I wasn't allowed to go back to the birth centre.
So frustrating.
Yeah, even though what had happened to me was a result of,
not your, exactly,
clinical management. So, so I went, okay, we just need to get the money. I'm going to have a home birth this time. So I employed a beautiful midwife, Maggie, and she ended up being my midwife for all 3 of my babies.
Wow.
And just had really straightforward home births, 1998, 1999 and 2001.
Wow.
So 3 girls and a boy, and they were, quick, easy, no bleeding, placentas born physiologically, absolutely no problems. The last one was like an hour from beginning to end.
Whoa.
The third one, the midwife didn't get there. He was born before she arrived.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so it was at the time, it was seen as a very fringe dwelling activity. It wasn't. There was no publicly funded home birth, and there was actually no continuity of midwifery care in any setting apart from home birth.
Yeah.
So you couldn't go to the hospital and get on an MGP or anything like that. There wasn't anything like it. It was really fragmented care.
Yeah.
And it was the only way that you could get your own midwife.
Yeah.
To plan a home birth.
Yeah. I feel like somebody told me the other day that even in Victoria where I am, that there's still only like 3 hospitals or something that have MGP programs, which seems like, it's 2024. Like, seems so bizarre. We have such good research on continuity of care.
I know. It's ridiculous, actually.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But, I mean, so I feel like all of the good things that have happened in the system since that time have all come from the home birth model of care. So, like continuity of midwifery care, water birth, children being present at births, physiological third stage, all of the things. It's all originated from home birth, which is really physiological birth.
Yeah, and so, in the 90s when you're having these home births and I guess finding perhaps home birth community, was there much home birth community in your area at that time, or what was that like? Yeah,
there was. I was the first home birth I had was in Sydney, and then I moved to the Blue Mountains and had 2 more. And there was a really strong home birth community in the Blue Mountains. Still is. It's a very strong community up there. And I got very involved. I was the coordinator of Home Birth Access Sydney, which is now known as Home Birth New South Wales. And I took various roles in that organisation. I started as the treasurer, for God's sake. I mean, I had no idea about money, but anyway.
Buddy.
I started as that and ended up like making the magazine, and then ended up being the coordinator. And that was between 1999 and 2005.
Yeah.
And then from 2005 to 2010, I became the national convener of Homebirth Australia.
Yeah, wow.
And I worked, Justine Keynes was the coordinator or the president of Maternity Coalition. She was a fierce consumer activist who sadly died a couple of years ago, but she and I worked very closely together. And it was mad time, it was a wild time. And in that time, what happened with the midwifery world? Well, okay, I'll go back a bit. Then I became a doula, and a childbirth.
So after you've had the four babies?
No, it was
during.
I became a doula when I had the third baby.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Yep.
So, and worked as a doula. My mum was around, so she was amazing. She used to come and just look after the kids if I was called out,
Yeah.
And I worked. I did that, but I worked mainly with the home birth midwife in the Blue Mountains. In fact, she employed me to come to births with her.
Oh, amazing!
So it wasn't the women that paid me; it was the midwife.
Yeah.
And I learnt more from her, doing that in the years that I did that for. It was about 8 years I did that for than I did in any lecture theatre. It was amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I did that, and then also ran childbirth classes. So people used to come to my home, and I worked with another woman, Natalie, and we used to do that together. And then from there, back then, if you wanted to become a midwife, you had to do nursing first. And then you just did like a tacked-on year at the end of it of midwifery. And they changed the law. The reason why they didn't have a separate midwifery degree was because nurses and midwives were registered under the same board. It was like the nursing and midwifery board. So they had to change the law so that midwifery was a separate profession to nursing so that they could then create a Bachelor of Midwifery degree.
Yeah, wow,
okay.
Yeah.
So I was in the second cohort of the Bachelor of Midwifery at UTS in Sydney, which was, I think it was the first university in Australia to do the Bachelor of Midwifery. I didn't want to do nursing. I was like, I would never have done it actually if I had to do nursing first because I just felt like that's not who I am.
Yeah.
And it is a very different profession. So
100%. Yeah.
But it was an interesting thing doing it because, it was such an early course that, when we didn't do anatomy and physiology or pathophysiology that was related to midwifery, we were bunched in with the nurses. So, because they didn't have a separate course for it. So we were like learning about prostates and testicles.
Oh my God.
It's hilarious. But,
what? Yeah.
Anyway, it's changed a lot since then.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's really cool though, because Beth, who I chatted to last month or the month before, she was also part of one of these very first cohorts of Bachelor of Midwifery students. I think she said in 2001, 2002, something maybe like that. But yeah, I hadn't thought about how much it would have evolved over 20, 24 years.
Yeah, it's changed. I mean, it's 19 years for me. Since I started. So it's changed a lot, thank God.
Yeah.
I mean, even the clinical placement, they just didn't know what to do with us because with midwifery clinical placements prior to that, they were nurses first. So they'd done all the nursing things, whereas we didn't. We started and we were we didn't know how to do blood pressures. We didn't know
blood pressure,
any of that stuff, So when we went on to clinical placement, they were like, we weren't really.
You guys are useless.
We weren't really liked, put it that way. There wasn't a lot of liking us.
Oh my gosh. Because when I was a student midwife, that was one of the main things that you'd be sent to go do, the blood pressures, the vital signs, that was your bread and butter. If you didn't know how to do that, you were pretty useless to them. Oh my gosh. And do you remember because right now, obviously, there's a lot of talk around the professional indemnity insurance and the lack of it, and whatever else Medicare, home birth, that kind of stuff. But, back 20 years ago when you're having your home births and in that community, please tell me there were some different issues, or were they the exact same issues?
No, they were very different. I mean, things have got a lot better in some ways.
Yeah, okay.
In some ways they've got a lot better. In other ways they've got a lot worse.
Yeah.
And I think, so there was no Medicare.
Yeah.
They were endorsed midwives weren't a thing. A midwife was a midwife. You could just go and work as a home birth midwife if that's what you wanted to do. There were no midwifery guidelines. The ACM didn't have. The first guidelines were written in 2004.
Wow.
So prior to that, there weren't any. And midwives, there was insurance, but you didn't have to have it.
Yeah.
You didn't have to have it. Some midwives chose to have it, others chose not to. So like the woman that was my midwife, like midwives just used to attend anything. Like they would go to breaches and twins and whatever women wanted, they would do.
Yep.
You know, so I mean, obviously within their comfort zone and within their scope of what they've experienced. But, you know, the more experienced midwives would attend whatever went down. Because there weren't any guidelines, right? So the guidelines have been written, and the guidelines were really written, yes, to guide our practice, and they are only a guide. They're not rules. So there is very clear pathways for women that choose care outside of them. But they were written really to help midwives both collaborate when it was necessary, because that was a real issue back then. Like back in the late 90s and early 2000s, you know, midwives were just getting reported left, right, and centre. You'd only have to step foot in a hospital, and you were reported because you know, for whatever reason, there was a real lack of understanding of the way that home birth midwifery worked. Collaboration was a really there was the odd obstetrician that was happy to sort of work with the home birth midwives, but mostly not. So it was being a home birth midwife was also a very fringe dwelling activity back then. I wasn't one, but you know, my midwife was, and of course I was involved in the movement, and so I knew a lot of them. And so we lobbied hard for Medicare actually, and in some ways it's been a good thing, in other ways it hasn't.
That's what I've heard too.
So I was at the helm of Homebirth Australia when we were doing a lot of the lobbying around, making it more affordable for women by trying to get Medicare. And going back to what happened with the insurance was that in 2010 they created national registration. So prior to 2010, it was state-based registration. So if I wanted to go and work in Queensland, I would have to re-register as a midwife in Queensland. So they created this national registration, but with it came the need to have professional and indemnity insurance in order to register as a practitioner. And by then there wasn't any for home birth midwives. And it wasn't because there had been a big claim. It was because at the time there was only about 180 of us around Australia, and what the insurance companies were saying, well, there's not going to be enough money. If there is a claim, there's only 180 people doing it. It's not a financially viable thing for us to do as an insurance company. So, no, we're not offering it. So what that meant when national registration came through meant that we couldn't register as midwives because we didn't have insurance. So we organised this mother of all rallies in Canberra.
Yeah, I've heard about this.
3,000 people showed up.
Wow.
The airlines went into meltdown because all these babies were coming on that they didn't, at the time you didn't have to say that you had a baby because it wasn't a seat. They would sit on your lap.
Wow. Oh, my gosh,
But they were only allowed to have a certain amount on a flight. They were like, we're not allowed to have this many babies. Anyway, that happened, and it was amazing. And Nicola Roxon, who was the health minister at the time, gave us a 3-year exemption from needing to have professional indemnity insurance. And with that came a bunch of rules and hoops to jump through, which is called the Safety and Quality Guidelines for Privately Practising Midwives, which we have to follow in order to be eligible for the exemption.
Oh, my gosh, so you got to be also – I'd never even thought about that being eligible for the exemption. I just thought everyone would – like that was just a broad thing. Oh, my gosh.
So we had to do – well, the 2 midwife rule came in. Prior to that, we could go to home births on our own. There's lots of things. We had to do 10 more CPD points than anybody else per year. We had to do the pharmacology course and become endorsed and get a Medicare provider number and keep up with do a yearly emergency skills and drills, resus, maternal infant resus. I mean, a lot of that hasn't been a bad thing, actually. I'm not complaining about that, but there's been a lot of hoops. So we had an audit. We had to every single home birth midwife was audited. Our notes had to be sent through across Australia. Like in no other profession has that ever been done.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine like if they audited the doctors, you wouldn't even be able to read those handwritten notes. And the notes that I've seen as a nurse from doctors are so brief, so nondescript. Like that would never happen.
Total double standards there, absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's what happened in 2010, and so every 3 years they've revisited the fact that we don't have insurance, and they've just continued to give us an exemption every 3 years because they couldn't find a solution. So now what they've done is the government a few weeks ago said that they found a product. There's been no consultation with anybody as of yet.
Yeah.
Even the College of Midwives, there's been no consultation.
Yeah.
And we don't know what it means. Nobody knows. There's nothing written. All we know is it's for low-risk women. Yeah. We don't know what low risk means. Got no idea.
Yeah.
We don't know what it would mean for women who are outside what is considered low risk, whether they would still be able to access a home birth and whether we'd have an exemption for that. Like there's just we actually don't know where things are at. Yeah. And it's, the home birth community are reeling about it because it's not only the women but the midwives as well. I mean, 60% of my caseload would be considered higher risk if you looked at it from the guidelines perspective. Yeah. I hate the word, but higher needs is a better way of saying it.
Yeah.
And so, and what's it going to mean? Is it going to be violating human rights? Because at the moment we've got the guidelines. So there's Category A, which is considered low risk. Category B is, have a chat with another health professional about the situation. And Category C is refer on to an obstetrician. And that would be like placenta previa, where the placenta is over the cervix. That absolutely has to be a cesarean. There's no other two ways about it. Refer. So Category B, if women fall into Category B, and some of those things would be, there's so many, IVF.
I think macrosomnia.
Yeah, there's so many.
Fits in there, yeah.
Previous third-degree tear.
Anything.
Yeah. Too fat, too thin, too old, too young.
Yeah. Pretty much.
But there's a pathway for us to follow. So if women choose care, that if they're fall into Category B and they want to have a home birth, there's a pathway that's called a record of understanding that we fill out with the woman. It's butt covering for the midwife, but it's also to ensure that you're, sharing research and evidence-based information with the woman so that she can make an informed decision about which way she wants to go. And at the end of the day, it is her decision. And what we don't have in Australia is a duty of care to the woman. So we can, in those guidelines, we can just discontinue care if we want to. We can just say, no, you're 39 weeks and I don't want to support you anymore, sorry. On your way, which is bullshit. It shouldn't be something that we can do. In England, they've got a duty of care. They have to continue to look after the woman, or they have to find someone to step in who will. Yeah.
I think I've read something about that in the UK about women refusing to go into hospital, and then I've seen people say, they'll send a midwife, like they have to, like a midwife has to go or something. And I just thought, oh my gosh, if you did that here, like no one's coming for you. Like no one's going to help you.
No, and it's so bad.
They'll send the ambulance, but that's about it.
And then there'll be coercion and all the things that come with that, Police probably.
Probably. Yeah.
Actually, I believe that would actually be the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I spoke to another midwife, Bibi, who shared her free birth twin story a few months ago, and I was telling like a friend who's a social worker, and his joke was like, we need to call CPS, like child protection. I was like, oh my gosh, no, that's not why I told you the story. But I guess I think
but that is, like for a health professional, so a paramedic, it's mandatory reporting. That is what it is. You're required to do that.
Yeah, that's madness. I think that there definitely is a misunderstanding about what midwives do and what home birth midwives do. And are home birth midwives, this fringe group that, isn't very educated. But, you've just said, you have to do, did you say 10 more CPD hours? Yeah. And usually I think I have to do 20 as a nurse. Is it usually 20?
It's usually 30, but we have to do 40.
You have to do 40. Yeah, I hope mine is 20 then. And the extra, because you have to do extra study to get your endorsement for the pharmacology to give it medication, and also to request pathology as well.
To
Is
write
that
referrals for ultrasounds and pathology and scripts for drugs. And to get a Medicare provider number so that women can get some rebate for antenatal and postnatal care. There's no rebate for the birth part of the care.
Just pausing here to thank the July sponsor, Bimby and Roy. They describe their products as versatile intimates that adapt to your everyday, but they are also the unofficial outfit of labour and birth for women across Australia. Was anyone else counting their appearance in the Born at Home film? In my first labour and birth, I unexpectedly found myself completely naked, which is fine, but when planning my labour and birth for Frankie, I knew Bimby and Roy would be my outfit. They are perfect for the sweat and water that labour so often involves, and because of their ability to dry quickly, you can wear them comfortably no matter where you are labouring. You can check out all of their beautiful designs yourself at bimbyandroy.com.au. Enjoy!
But one of the things that is the talk on the street is that with this insurance coming, potentially there might be, because it's now there'll be insurance, potentially there might be a Medicare rebate for the birth. I don't know. Who knows?
But seems a big risk to take.
But it's also that thing of, one, we're allowing an insurance company to dictate midwifery practice and to dictate when women can birth at home, but also once the government becomes involved, there's going to be rules attached to it. There just are.
Yeah.
It's the way of the world.
Yeah.
So, my preference would be let's just have an exemption. Let's just have a forever exemption.
A forever exemption, yeah. Maybe we can propose that.
I don't know how much it would go through.
Do you feel like, I guess from my perspective, this is the first sort of major home birth related controversy or that is happening. But compared to your experience historically, does this feel different? Does it feel the same as previous fights?
It feels the same. It
feels the same.
It
yeah.
It just feels like we're just banging our head against a brick wall,
Yeah. Yeah.
But I am confident that it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Strangely so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, women have been birthing at home for literally forever before all of this existed.
Exactly.
It's not going to stop women. It's
not going to stop women. It would suck for women who, free birth is a valid choice for women, and if that's what they really want to do because they want a free birth, then that's fabulous.
Yeah.
If they're forced into it when they actually really do want to have midwifery care, that's really not okay. That's an issue because they feel it's safer for them than to step back into the hospital system. Or to step into it to start with. Then that's not an okay reason to be choosing it. And lots of women do want to have a midwife. There are a lot of women that do want to have midwifery care.
Yeah.
And we know that it does create, the home birth model of care, planned attended home birth, it has the best outcomes in everything.
Yeah.
In any other model of care. So let's look to the evidence when making decisions around what is acceptable for an insurance company to insure, because we know that, VBAC women do better at home.
Yeah.
We know that there's higher rates of vaginal birth after caesarean and higher rates of satisfaction, and babies do better, so it's still quite unknown and not really understood the way in which women choose home birth and the way in which home birth midwives work.
Yeah.
I hope I hope Birth Time's done a little bit to educate people on that. That was kind of the plan.
Yeah. I think it has. Like, yeah, gosh, when I watched it, I was just like, whoa, like this could be something. And now that this is happening, I feel like it's even further motivation to share birth time. And like, it's so beautifully spelt out in the documentary that, like, how can you argue with it? Like,
that's right. You can't.
You can't.
When you've got academics, when you've got academics, when you've got research, and when you've got women and birthing people and families, all saying it, that you can't deny it. So I think what really needs to happen is Homebirth Australia needs to be they are the key stakeholder.
Yeah, it's literally called Homebirth Australia. 100%. So like,
and they do represent home birthing women, but also home birth midwives.
Yeah.
So much work behind the scenes. I mean, they've done this survey that 5,900 people filled out. And you can't deny that, the information in that either. So I'm feeling quietly confident that it's going to be okay, but it's not going to be without a fight.
Yeah,
we're going to have to
and
be
I think like
really vigilant and just
if making sure that we're at the table.
Absolutely. If Homebirth Australia is not at the table, then Mother of All Rallies 2 is coming at you.
V2. Yeah, absolutely. I haven't asked anybody this before, like a midwife, but so you have the safety and quality. Do you call them guidelines or safety and quality guidelines?
For privately practicing midwives.
Privately practicing midwives. Yeah. So for like women out there having twins or breech or, what might fall under like higher risk categories, if the woman or, the birthing person feels informed enough to make that decision that they want to have a baby at home, no matter if they're bummed down, if there's two of them or whatever, what is sort of stopping or influencing the midwife, a private practicing midwife in Australia, from supporting somebody through that?
The quality and safety guidelines say that it should be home birth should be I can't remember the exact terminology, but it's something along the lines of without risk factors in that pregnancy, singleton and cephalic, which is one baby and head down. We do have the guidelines. And they're guidelines, they're not rules. So if a woman chose, one, she'd have to find someone that would be prepared to support her.
100%. It
isn't going to be that easy in this climate.
No.
And two, and if she did, she would then need to be fully aware of the fact that her midwife could be reported.
Yeah. So, and that's like at the end of the day, that's like the midwife's, well, generally livelihood. Like that's
I do think that that's probably the biggest contributing factor to midwives choosing not to attend breech and twins at home. It's not because they don't believe women should have that choice. It's not because they don't believe it's a safe choice. But they're scared of losing their registration. That's what it's about.
I think I have seen discussion about this on, social media, and there's sort of being a misunderstanding sometimes where the woman or family say, but like we wouldn't report, like we're happy with like whatever outcome, we just want this journey. But it's not even about the family, because anyone can report the midwife.
Yeah, like if it became an issue where you had to transfer to hospital, absolutely a report would happen. There's no two ways about it. It would 100%, especially twins. There would be a report put in, and we know, look at the midwives who have been deregistered. They're all midwives who have supported twins, as pretty much twins at home. Yeah. So for midwives that are thinking about doing that or, choosing to support breaches and twins, it's really like get your documentation really up to scratch, and really follow the guidelines with it, that record of understanding so that women can fill it in. But also, most home birth midwives wouldn't have had experience with
absolutely.
Particularly, we've all had experience with breaches, but with twins, it's a whole different ball game when you've got 2 babies and 2 placentas, and if you haven't actually done a twins birth anywhere in any setting, you're probably not the safest practitioner to be, supporting it either. So
and that's pretty sad because that's just like a product of like the culture that we've created. So we've de-skilled everyone. 100%. So now even obstetricians aren't even like confident to do half these things that they should be. Or originally, would have been a midwives.
We need a Dr. Stu here.
Yeah, we do need a Dr. Stu.
Someone, an obstetrician who'd be prepared to attend those with midwives. So the midwives could get their skills up, but also so that you've got somebody that's had a lot of experience with it, present. Yeah, because even Breach Without Borders does amazing work in reteaching breech and whatnot. But, realistically, how often do you just generally, rhetorically, as a private midwife, come across breech in a home birth setting to be able to sort of practice these skills so you can have this certificate or whatever I presume they give. But in Australia, if you're engaging in scans and the medical system antenatally and they pick up breech, then you're going to have a lot of questions. And so it's going to be hard to fight that off. Most women don't, that choose to home birth don't have all the scans, to be honest. Most will just have the morphology scan. If they have any, but usually they'll have one. And it'd be the morphology. And, the breaches that I've attended have been, oh, okay, you're pushing and look, there's a toothpaste meconium coming out. And whoops-a-daisy, there's a breach, So, there's been a few of those. But so it's important to know what to do and to have the skills to do it.
Yeah. I think that, hopes for the future. And being a home birth midwife, so is that what you still mostly do at the moment? Because I think, is there birth time number 2?
No.
Is that no? No. But you've got the podcast?
We've got the podcast,
Yeah.
And, we might do a little bit of filming of other things. We're thinking about, we're going to be doing some stuff with Wominda. I don't know what it's going to be yet or what it will turn into, but we'll follow the story a bit because we've got so much footage of when they were really starting to first set that up, and we went down there for this magical weekend where we were speaking to all the women and they told us their stories. We couldn't put all of that in the film because it's a film of its own, actually. So we've got heaps of footage and heaps of amazing things. So we would like to, and we've talked to them about following the story a bit, but we're just going to film it and see what happens. I don't know. It might not turn into anything, but that's going to be one thing. And then we've got the podcast, the Birth Time podcast, which I'm really loving doing, actually. It's you enjoying doing yours?
It's just nice to chat to people. I suppose I started the podcast and Home Birth Victoria because I didn't really know any other home birth families, parents, mums, kids. I knew Homebirth Australia existed. I knew about Homebirth New South Wales, Homebirth Queensland. But in my own sort of circle, I didn't know anyone. So it's been really amazing to chat to women and partners and midwives all over Australia and sometimes internationally as well. And just I spoke to actually an Australian, but she lives in Canada the other weekend about her experience with home birth. And I just it's just, and I guess that's what brings me hope as well. Like you say, all of these issues, it's not going to change. people are still going to be able to have a home birth. It's just complicating if the midwife, has more rules to follow about being in attendance.
Absolutely. People will still be able to have a home birth, but it might not be midwife attended.
Yeah. Lots and lots of question marks.
And which, it's not okay.
No.
It's not okay.
No.
We know that, anyway, that's a whole lot.
Yeah, but I'm keen for a rally. I mean, I hope it doesn't come to that, but I am keen for a rally. I get the sense, like everyone that I speak to, has chosen home birth for a particular reason, and often, I think I counted the other day that basically 50% of my episodes are mums that have come to home birth after subsequent hospital births, whether they're not always traumatic. They might have been fine. They might have been very quick births in hospital, and that's why they've chosen home birth. There's a variety of reasons why, women choose home birth. But it's not, I feel that, when somebody becomes pregnant, like the obvious thing is like, oh, we'll go to hospital and this is what we'll do. But it's very intentional when somebody chooses home birth. You don't just usually accidentally end up having a home birth,
it's not a cheap thing to do.
Yeah, it's not a cheap thing. Yeah.
And then accessing a midwife. I mean, like I'm booked out till the end of March next year.
Yep.
I mean,
wow.
I've got 3 women booked in who are 3 weeks pregnant.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Wow.
It's absolutely ridiculous. There's just not enough midwives working in this way.
Yeah.
And, I'm turning women away every month.
Wow.
So, and for the rules around home birth with a private midwife to try and be the same as the rules around a hospital-run home birth program is not going to work.
No.
It's not going to work. I mean, the sort of women that choose to home birth through a hospital program are women that they're the kind of women that are okay to birth in a birth centre. And they should understand from the beginning that they could be denied access to that at any point. They could develop something that means that they can no longer birth there. And, we all get phone calls from women at 36 weeks saying, I've been kicked off the home birth program.
Briefed out. Yep.
And we're like, well, sorry, but
yeah.
It's not going to work. I mean, women choose to birth outside the system for a reason.
Yeah.
So the rules can't be the same as the system. Otherwise, we may as well not be bothering.
Yeah, absolutely. When I've created the map for home birth, like privately practicing registered midwives in Victoria, when I've like put it on a map, there are so many like just spots where there's no, like there's people living out there, and if they wanted to have a home birth, and you see it like if you're between, I don't know, like probably Bendigo, Ballarat, I think there's like 1 or 2 midwives in like Shepparton, but like any further than that, like it's just I think it's called like a midwifery desert. Like there's no private midwives in that area, and it's really sad. And I imagine it must be very stressful to want to intentionally choose to have a home birth with a midwife, which I think is everyone's right, and then just simply not be able to like access one. That must be really hard to overcome because all of these little hubs have hospitals.
I've had women come from remote New South Wales and get an Airbnb close to where I live. To have a home away from home birth. Because it would, even out in some of those really remote places, they do have to relocate anyway to be near a hospital. To give birth. So they will, I want to have a home birth, so I'm going to, gosh, it's a lot. Yeah. That's a lot to do.
Yeah.
To bring, I had one woman who, I was living in the Blue Mountains at the time, and she came from Cobar, And she brought her other 3 children, her budgie, a dog, a cat, partner obviously, and they rented a Airbnb for a month. So 2 weeks before her due date and 2 weeks after.
Yeah.
And the guinea pigs, they brought their whole family in the menagerie with them. You know.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. I think I saw because we're hopefully going to be having 5 publicly funded home birth programs in, well, let's be honest, it's basically Melbourne. You can't really say it's Victoria because they're all based in Melbourne. But, you know, Melbourne is also a big place when you look at the, you know, geography. But, you know, they all have, except for the Royal Women's, they're all probably going to have like a 30-minute cutoff, like radius. The Women's has 20 minutes. And, you know, it's been very distressing for a lot of people because if you meet the criteria and what denies you that opportunity is like simply where you live, it's been suggested on like Airbnb or like, you know, temporary accommodation. But you have to, like, it has to be your registered address. Like the hospital says, no, you can't cheat the system like that. And that's just... I mean, it's just very frustrating.
I know people that have used a family member's address that's within that area, and then I've moved.
Yeah,
to here at 36 weeks.
Yeah, surprise. Yeah, that's very convenient. But yeah, like lots and lots of question marks. But yeah, I guess there's just a lot of questions and no answers, and I think at the moment it's sort of like Chinese whispers, like, and I think social media feeds that as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. It's, you know, we don't know. I mean, everyone's saying you won't be able to have a home birth, but we don't know that. We don't know if that's true or not. And obviously anyone can have a home birth, but with a midwife, it's there's nothing, we don't know.
Yeah.
So but we need to make sure we're at the table so that when these decisions are being made, that they're being made in a way that is going to not violate people's human rights.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's been really lovely to speak to you.
You too.
And get some like history and a chat about midwifery and home birth. And are you going to be at the Homebirth Australia conference? Do you go to that?
Yeah, I'm speaking at it actually.
Oh, you're speaking? Yeah. Oh, me too.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'll meet you there.
That's great. Yeah, meet you in person there. Did you have anything that you wanted to say that you haven't said or anything like that?
I think we were going to just do one little bit about the challenges of either being or becoming a home birth midwife.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
And I think probably the biggest challenge is this need to have the 5,000 hours or equivalent to 3 years full-time practice before you can even think about becoming a home birth midwife.
Yeah.
I mean, from my perspective, a midwife is a midwife.
Yeah.
When I went straight out into private practice from my degree, I was in a fortunate position of having worked for 10 years or 8 years with a home birth midwife. So I did feel very comfortable and confident. But I just wish there was some way that, you know, midwives could come out of university and come and work maybe as a second midwife for a year or two with an established, experienced home birth midwife, and then be able to just put the shingle out and set up private practice. Because I feel like if it became an affordable thing and if there was a lot more midwives doing it, imagine how amazing it would be if it was like in New Zealand and we just had houses dotted around all the suburbs that were, you know, where the midwives congregated, and then you could either birth there or they'd come to your home. Yeah. You know, like, it's not hard.
Yeah, and we've got role models like New Zealand that we can look to and be like, look at what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, the actual system's good, but their midwives aren't paid enough. There's the burnout. Yeah. The burnout. They've got to do like 10 births a month to even make a living. So the burnout rate is very high for midwives in New Zealand. But you know, if they got paid better, because it's a lot. You know, it's a lot on your life. Like, you know, 24/7 on call. It is a lot. It's a beautiful lot, but it's a lot.
Yeah. I like as a student midwife, I was on call for my follow through women, but obviously that was quite a few years ago now. But like I'm doing my doula training with Rhea Dempsey, and I went to my first birth with that the other day, and from 38 weeks, and she first baby, she gave birth at 42 plus 3 or 4, and so on call for over 4 weeks, like every night I was like making sure, is my phone like I'm sure you get used to that.
You do get
it was a lot of like flashbacks to student midwife life. But yeah, you got to be mindful, like, have I got enough fuel in the car? Like she lives 30 minutes away. Am I going to make it there if I haven't fueled up? Is my phone charged? Have I got a charger? Yeah. These are like rookie things, but like it is like there's extra thing you can't go too far.
Yeah, and you could be in the middle of doing anything. I've been in the middle of painting a fence and had to just quickly put the paint away and go, or dinner with the family, or Christmas Day. I've had to twice on Christmas Day. I've been called to birth some. So you do need to, like, your family needs to be pretty on board. And that can be tough for them sometimes. It can be, particularly children. I missed some things. My oldest daughter was school captain, and I missed her, the badge thing, because I was at a birth. So, other people's families become before yours, really. When a woman's in labour, it is what it is. And, thankfully my kids have been beautifully understanding about it, and they've always been used to it. But I reckon it'd be pretty tough. There'd be times where it'd be hard to deal with.
The next time that I left the house, my 4-year-old Murphy, he was like, are you going to another baby, or is she having another baby? And I was like, no.
I love that name, Murphy. Oh my God, Murphy, that's so cute.
Murphy and Frankie. Gorgeous. Both born at home, both over 4.5 kilos.
There you go. Wrist out next time.
Yeah, right. So that's what I'm passionate about. I think, macrosomnia or whatever. So however you say it is in category B. So it would be, I would have to, if that was the, criteria, I'd have to get someone to sign off to say that I was allowed to do it or something. So that's where my motivation comes from. Like, because there was nothing else wrong. Like big babies, that wasn't something wrong with me. I firmly believe that, like, I just have big babies.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. I'm the same. And I would have been risked out for previous postpartum hemorrhage. Going over 42 weeks. I went over 42 weeks with one of them. Being over 4.5 kilos was enough. There's so many things. And I just had these amazing, beautiful, straightforward homebirths, and most people do. Yeah. Actually, when you just leave it alone, it works.
Amazing. Like, how are we even here?
Exactly.
Like,
that's right.
Birth works for tens and I don't know, hundreds of thousands of years of evolution of Homo sapiens. Like, we're here.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, amazing to chat with you, Jo. And I'll meet you in person. I keep getting confused, but it's November, right?
November.
The conference in November. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you. Loved it.